October 12, 1998. A quiet street in Cedar Hills, Texas. Streetlights flicker, power lines hum, and then everything goes dark. For exactly 43 minutes, the entire block is plunged into silence. No phones, no lights, no witnesses. When the power returns, an entire family is gone. Daniel and Claire Taylor and their 2 children, Emma and Ryan, vanished without a trace. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just 4 empty plates on a dinner table, still warm, waiting for a family that would never sit down again. For years, investigators searched, neighbors whispered, and theories grew wild. But the truth, buried in abandoned farmhouses, hidden photographs, and the mind of a man who understood how to weaponize darkness, would prove more terrifying than anyone imagined. Subscribe for more true crime stories, and stay with us, because once you hear what happened in Cedar Hills, you'll never look at a simple blackout the same way again. The street looked ordinary in daylight. 2-story homes lined both sides of Ashwood Drive, each with manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and flags that hung from porches. But people who lived here long enough remembered the night when every house on the block lost power. The blackout that swallowed Ashwood whole. The Taylors lived in the white brick colonial halfway down the street. Daniel Taylor, 42, worked in financial planning. His wife Claire was a stay-at-home mother who occasionally taught piano lessons. Their children, Emma and Ryan, were 9 and 12. On the surface, they were the family everyone wished they could be: polite, involved in church, present at school fundraisers. But when police entered the home in the early hours of October 18th, what they saw made little sense. The dinner table was set with chicken and rice, half-eaten. 2 wine glasses still held melted ice cubes. The dog, a golden retriever named Jasper, was shut inside the laundry room with no food or water. Upstairs, the children's beds were empty, blankets thrown back as though they'd left in a hurry. Every exit was locked. There were no broken windows, no signs of forced entry, no blood. Detectives called it the cleanest disappearance they'd ever seen. For weeks, helicopters circled farmland and creeks outside Cedar Hills. Flyers with the Taylors' faces appeared on telephone poles across the county. Search parties combed nearby woods, but the family had evaporated. 16 years later, Ashwood Drive remained haunted by that single night. Neighbors still shivered when they passed the Taylor house, now abandoned, the lawn overgrown, shutters peeling. Teens dared each other to step inside at night, only to run screaming when the floor creaked. And then, in 2014, construction crews demolishing a property 2 streets over unearthed something beneath the concrete foundation. A buried lockbox. Inside it, photographs, grainy Polaroids. The Taylors, alive, but bound. Detective Raymond Vega arrived at Ashwood Drive just after 2 a.m. The air was cool, crisp with October's edge, but the street carried the uneasy stillness of a theater after the lights go out. Patrol cars lined the block, their red and blue lights painting the pale houses in eerie waves of color. Vega parked behind a county cruiser, stepped out, and inhaled deeply before pulling his coat tighter. "Detective Vega?" A uniformed officer hurried over, notepad in hand. His breath puffed clouds in the chilled air. "We've secured the scene. No sign of the family. Neighbors say the lights went out around 8:30 p.m. Power restored about 40 minutes later. By then, the Taylors weren't answering calls or knocks at the door." "Who made first entry?" Vega asked. "Sergeant Collins. We forced the back door when no one answered. Thing is, the door was deadbolted. From the inside." Vega frowned. He glanced down the quiet cul-de-sac, where curious neighbors stood in clusters beyond the yellow tape, murmuring in hushed voices. The blackout had been block-wide, but it was the Taylor residence that had swallowed up 4 lives without a sound. "Show me," Vega said. The officer led him toward the white colonial. Its porch light was dark. The front yard, neat by daylight standards, seemed almost staged under the sweep of squad car beams. Vega climbed the steps, his shoes crunching on the scattered acorns that littered the walkway, and stepped into the foyer. Inside smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something else, the ghost of a warm meal gone cold hours ago. The dining room table sat directly ahead, 4 chairs tucked in, plates still half full of chicken and rice. Vega's eyes flicked to the condensation rings beneath the wine glasses. The ice had melted into cloudy pools. "Nothing's been touched?" he asked. "Not since Collins went through," the officer confirmed. Vega stepped closer. The silverware lay exactly where it had been abandoned, forks pointing into unfinished portions, knives with smears of butter across their blades. One plate bore the shallow crescent of a bite, as if Emma or Ryan had been mid-chew when something happened. He moved into the living room. A television remote lay on the couch, pointed at the blank screen. Family photographs decorated the mantel. Daniel in a pressed suit, Claire in a flowing sundress, the children in their Little League and recital outfits. In every image, the family smiled with a polish that almost looked rehearsed. "Upstairs?" Vega asked. The officer nodded. They climbed the carpeted staircase, their steps muffled. In Ryan's room, model airplanes hung from the ceiling. His homework was scattered across the desk, math problems half solved, a pencil resting where he'd left it. Emma's room smelled faintly of lavender. A dollhouse stood in the corner, tiny furniture arranged neatly. On the bed, her blanket lay crumpled as if she'd pushed it aside in haste. "Windows locked," the officer noted. "No tampering." Vega crossed into the master bedroom. Claire's vanity was cluttered with perfume bottles, an open jewelry box, and a hairbrush tangled with blonde strands. The bed looked slept in, covers askew, but there were no signs of a struggle. He bent to check under the bed, then opened the closet. Clothes hung neatly, shoes aligned at the base. Nothing suggested a hurried packing. Back downstairs, Vega entered the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed quietly, still running despite the outage earlier. A calendar hung beside it, the squares filled with piano lessons, dental appointments, and reminders for Emma's choir rehearsals. October looked busy. Then he noticed the dog. The golden retriever whined softly from behind the laundry room door. When Vega opened it, the animal rushed out, nails skittering on tile. Its water bowl was dry, food untouched. Someone had locked Jasper away deliberately, not an accident. Vega crouched, scratching behind the dog's ears. "You didn't lock yourself up, did you?" he murmured. "Neighbors said they never heard barking," the officer added. "Not once." That detail stuck with Vega. A dog would bark if strangers entered, unless the dog knew them. He rose, moving to the back door. The wood frame bore no scratches, no splinters. The deadbolt was intact, locked tight. He examined the front door, same story. The windows, too, were secure. It was a sealed house. "Neighbors?" Vega asked. The officer checked his notes. The Martins across the street. They called when they noticed the Taylor's lights were still off after the grid came back. Said they thought it was odd. They knocked. No answer. By midnight, they called us. Vega rubbed his jaw. He'd worked missing persons for 12 years, seen the aftermath of voluntary vanishings, abductions, suicides. But this, a family evaporating mid-dinner, leaving behind a house locked from within, carried a precision he'd never encountered. He spent another hour combing through details. The garage held 2 vehicles, Daniel's Navy sedan and Claire's green station wagon. Both sat cold. The keys were on the kitchen counter beside a stack of unopened mail. At 3:30 a.m., Vega stood once more in the dining room, staring at the table. 4 plates, 4 lives, each interrupted in a single moment. The following morning, sunlight revealed what the night had concealed. The street was still buzzing with police presence. News vans had already arrived, reporters setting up equipment on lawns. Neighbors gathered in clusters, recounting where they had been when the blackout struck. Vega met with Sergeant Collins on the porch. The sergeant's eyes were ringed with exhaustion. No trace overnight, no ATM activity, no highway cameras, families not in the hospital system. It's like they walked off the map. They didn't walk out, Vega replied. The house was sealed. Collins frowned. So what are you thinking? Vega's gaze drifted across the street to the waiting reporters, microphones poised for scraps of information. He kept his voice low. Either they vanished willingly, in which case they had help, or they were taken. But if they were taken, it was by someone who knew how to vanish without leaving a mark. Collins exhaled heavily. That's not exactly reassuring. Vega's eyes returned to the dining table, visible through the front window. Plates frozen in time. He felt the weight of it, not just the disappearance, but the silence it left behind. In his gut, he knew, this was not a clean getaway. This was theater, a stage deliberately set, and whoever had written the script was still out there, watching. By dawn, Ashwood Drive resembled a stage under siege. Crime scene tape fluttered in the wind. Detectives moved in and out of the Taylor home with cameras, evidence bags, and notebooks. Neighbors huddled in driveways, their morning coffee forgotten, eyes wide with fear. Detective Vega stood at the edge of the property, scanning the clusters of onlookers. He'd learned over years of investigation that the first 24 hours of a disappearance were vital, not only for evidence but for human behavior. People revealed themselves when nerves were fresh. Some rushed to help. Some hung back. Some talked too much. And sometimes the most dangerous people were the ones who blended in, offering sympathy with practiced ease. He flipped open his notebook. Let's start with the Martins. The Martins lived directly across from the Taylors. Their brick home bore the same suburban uniformity as the rest of the neighborhood, but their yard carried the meticulous pride of retirees with time on their hands. Gerald and Linda Martin greeted Vega at the door, both dressed as if for church despite the early hour. "Detective," Gerald said, his voice shaky. "We can't believe this is happening. The Taylors are such a lovely family." "We're hoping you can help us with details," Vega said gently. "Can you walk me through what you saw last night?" They ushered him into a sitting room that smelled faintly of potpourri. Linda clasped her hands tightly in her lap as Gerald spoke. The power went out about 8:30. Whole street went dark. We sat by candlelight, waited it out. About 9:15, the lights flicked back. First thing we noticed, the Taylor's house stayed dark. No porch light, no glow in the windows. At first, we thought maybe their breaker tripped, but an hour later, still nothing. We went over, knocked. No answer. "Did you see or hear anything unusual during the blackout? Cars? Voices?" Vega asked. Linda hesitated, then shook her head. "Number just quiet. Too quiet. Even the crickets seemed to stop." Gerald cleared his throat. "When we knocked, Jasper barked once, but only once. That was the only sound all night." Vega noted the detail. A single bark. Then silence. The dog had been locked away by then. "Did you see the Taylors at all yesterday?" "Yes," Linda said quickly. "Claire was in the yard with the children after school. She waved to me. They seemed fine. Daniel came home around 6, I think. His car was in the driveway." Nothing in their words suggested malice, but Vega watched the way Linda twisted her wedding ring, the way Gerald avoided his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. When he stepped back outside, the sun had risen high enough to wash the street in pale gold. Reporters pressed closer to the tape, microphones thrust forward. Vega ignored them and crossed to the next house. The Johnsons lived 2 doors down. A younger couple with twin toddlers. They looked sleep-deprived even before the night's events. Kara Johnson balanced a child on her hip as she answered the door. "Detective?" "I already told the officer what I heard." "I'd like to hear it from you," Vega said. offering a reassuring nod. She sighed, adjusting the child's weight. The blackout scared the kids. They cried for nearly half an hour. Around 9, I thought I heard a car engine. Faint, like it was idling. But when I looked out the window, the street was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. Direction? She pointed vaguely toward the woods at the far end of Ashwood Drive. Did you hear doors open? Footsteps? Numbered just the engine. Then silence. Her husband, Mark, appeared behind her. His voice carried irritation. Detective, with respect, it was pitch dark. People are imagining things. The Taylors probably decided to leave. Take off. People do that. Kara shot him a look. Mark, what? I'm just saying. He shrugged. Families vanish. They'll turn up. Vega's eyes lingered on him. It wasn't the words. People said foolish things under stress. It was the tone, detached, almost defensive. Thank you both, Vega said evenly. By midday, Vega had interviewed 6 households. Most offered nothing beyond the timeline. Blackout at 8:30, power restored 40 minutes later, no movement seen at the Taylors' home. But patterns were emerging. Several mentioned a faint hum, like a generator, somewhere near the woods. One neighbor swore they saw a flicker of light moving through the trees during the outage. Vega returned to the Taylor house, the hub of the storm. Forensics had finished their sweep. No fingerprints beyond the families. No foreign DNA. Nothing disturbed. It was the absence that spoke loudest. He walked once more through the rooms, this time slower, letting details breathe. In the children's bedrooms, he paused at Emma's dollhouse. The miniature furniture was arranged neatly, except for one chair, tipped over. A small detail, maybe the careless hand of a child, or maybe an echo of something larger. In Ryan's room, he found a notebook under the bed. Flipping through, he saw sketches of airplanes, doodles, math problems. On one page, Ryan had scrawled a single phrase in bold letters. Don't open the door. Vega stared at the words, his chest tightening. Kids wrote strange things, borrowed from television or playground dares. But coming from a boy who had vanished in a sealed house, the phrase took on the weight of prophecy. The media frenzy worsened by afternoon. The Taylors' smiling faces filled every broadcast. Perfect suburban family vanishes, headlines declared. The narrative of innocence fed the storm. In the precinct conference room, Vega gathered with his team. Sergeant Collins ran through the basics on a whiteboard. Timeline, October 17th, 8:30 p.m., blackout hits. 9:15, power restored. Between those times, family disappears. No signs of forced entry. All doors locked from the inside. Dog contained. No vehicles missing, no financial activity since. Detective Harris leaned back in his chair. Sounds like they planned it. Packed up during the blackout, slipped away into the dark. With what? Vega asked. Clothes are still here. Cars are still here. Keys, wallets, purses. You think they left without shoes? Then someone took them, Harris countered. And locked the doors behind him, Vega shot back. How? The room fell into uneasy silence. Vega tapped the marker against the board. This wasn't random. Whoever did this knew the family, knew the dog, knew the house, and they knew how to erase footprints. Collins rubbed his temples. So where do we start? Vega's eyes drifted to the Polaroids tacked up on the board. Smiling family portraits, school pictures. Innocent faces staring back. We start, he said quietly, by tearing apart their lives piece by piece. Somewhere in their world, someone wanted them gone. That night, after the chaos subsided, Vega returned alone to Ashwood Drive. The tape fluttered in the wind, the street deserted now. He stood in the Taylors' dining room, staring at the plates still resting where they had been abandoned. In the silence, he could almost hear the clatter of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the hum of electricity before the power snapped. A moment suspended, then darkness. then nothing. He closed his eyes, imagining the scene as it must have unfolded. A knock at the door, maybe, or a voice outside the window, a choice made in shadow, a door unlocked, a family stepping into silence. Vega opened his eyes. On the table, the melted wine glasses reflected the faint glow of the streetlights outside, like eyes staring back. And he realized something chilling. Whoever had orchestrated the blackout had done it not for the neighborhood, but for this house, for this family. And they had known exactly how long 40 minutes would be. Detective Vega was not a man who believed in perfect families. Over years of missing persons and homicides, he had learned that behind every glossy portrait was a fracture line. Some were small, the usual stresses of money, illness, unspoken disappointments. Others were fissures wide enough to swallow entire lives. The Taylors' photographs, smiling and radiant, struck him as too polished, too curated. By Monday morning, less than 48 hours after the blackout, Vega sat in his office with a stack of files. The Taylors' financial records had begun to arrive. He thumbed through bank statements, tax returns, insurance policies. On the surface, everything looked neat. A healthy savings account, steady paychecks from Daniel's financial planning firm, a mortgage paid on time. But buried within the records, Vega spotted tremors. For the past 6 months, Daniel had withdrawn cash in irregular amounts. $400 here, $600 there, always in person, never by check. Nearly $9,000 gone in half a year, unaccounted for. Vega leaned back, frowning. Money off the books meant one of two things: debts or secrets. And secrets had a way of festering until they infected everyone around them. His phone buzzed. Sergeant Collins. "Ray, you'll want to hear this. We ran Claire Taylor's phone records. There's a number she called repeatedly in the weeks before they vanished. Not family, not friends. Belongs to a pay-as-you-go cell registered under a fake name. Burner." "Location?" Vega asked. "Pinged near Cedar Hills twice. Other times, all over the county, hard to trace." Vega scribbled the detail in his notebook. A burner phone? Claire, the piano teacher and church volunteer, calling someone who didn't want to be found. "Dig deeper," Vega said. "Find me a pattern." That afternoon, Vega met with Daniel's employer. The financial firm sat in a polished office park, glass and steel reflecting the sun. The receptionist led him to a corner office where Daniel's manager, a thin man named Paul Renner, sat fiddling with his tie. "Daniel's disappearance has shaken us all," Renner said quickly. "He was one of our best. Clients loved him." "Any financial irregularities?" Vega asked. Renner hesitated. His numbers were fine. Not stellar, not poor. He had a reputation for being personable, maybe a little too friendly, but his books checked out. Too friendly. Renner gave a nervous smile. Off the record, Daniel had a way with women. Charming, flirtatious. I never saw anything inappropriate, but some of the staff, they talked. Vega let the silence linger. Renner shifted uncomfortably. "Did he owe anyone money?" Vega pressed. "Not to my knowledge. He was private, kept work and home separate." Private, yet almost $10,000 gone. When Vega left the building, he felt the threads tightening. Daniel had financial shadows. Claire had a burner contact. The smiling photographs were beginning to crack. That evening, Vega returned to Ashwood Drive. The house stood dark, a hollow shell of domesticity. He let himself inside, the air cool and stale. In the study, Daniel's desk was neatly organized, bills stacked, pens aligned, ledgers shelved. But one drawer stuck when Vega pulled. Forcing it open, he found a manila folder labeled in block letters, TRUST. Inside were documents related to an investment fund. On paper, the trust looked legitimate. A small group of clients, modest returns. But the signatures on the forms were all Daniel's, with no co-signers. and several of the clients' names were suspiciously common. John Smith, David Brown, shell clients, fabricated. Vega felt his pulse quicken. Daniel had been running something off the books. Whether it was fraud or money laundering, it meant motive. People lost fortunes when schemes collapsed, and fortunes bred enemies. The next day, Vega and Collins sat in the precinct conference room, files spread like puzzle pieces. Daniel's got dirty accounts, Vega said. Claire's got secret calls. Both could be leverage points. Both could explain why someone wanted them gone. Or why they ran, Collins countered. Vega shook his head. If they ran, why leave the cars? Why lock the dog away? Why vanish in the middle of dinner? Collins tapped a finger against his coffee cup. You think someone found out about the scheme, came during the blackout, forced them out? Maybe. But how do you walk a family of 4 out of a house without neighbors noticing? Collins didn't answer. The silence was filled by the low hum of the overhead lights, a sound Vega had grown to despise. The first real crack came from an unexpected place. Emma's teacher. Vega visited the elementary school later that week, the hallways echoing with the squeak of sneakers and the chatter of children. Mrs. Hale, Emma's homeroom teacher, met him with a troubled expression. Emma was a bright girl, she said, leading him into a quiet classroom. But lately she seemed distracted, nervous. Once, she told me she was afraid of the dark, not in the usual childish way. It was deeper. She said, when the lights go out, they come. Vega felt a chill ripple down his spine. Who did she mean? He asked. Mrs. Hale shook her head. She wouldn't say, just repeated it. When the lights go out, they come. The phrase echoed in Vega's mind, layered now with Ryan's scrawled warning. Don't open the door. The children had known something, and no one had listened. That night, Vega drove past the edge of Cedar Hills where the woods thickened into shadow. The road curved into darkness, the kind that swallowed headlights whole. He pulled over, stepped out, and listened. Silence. No hum of engines, no rustle of leaves, just a stillness that pressed against his ears. He thought of the Johnsons' account of an idling car, of the faint light moving through trees, of Emma's whispered fear. Somewhere in those woods, truth waited. But Vega also knew truth did not surface willingly. It had to be unearthed, dragged screaming into daylight. And whoever had orchestrated the blackout had buried theirs deep. The woods at the end of Ashwood Drive had always seemed like a buffer, a curtain of trees separating neat suburban lawns from the raw sprawl of Texas wilderness. Children treated it like forbidden territory, daring each other to sprint down its dirt path before nightfall. Adults dismissed it as swampy, mosquito-ridden, unkempt. But after the blackout, the woods took on a different cast, less a nuisance and more a stage. Detective Vega returned with 2 officers and a cadaver dog on Thursday morning. The October air was cool but thick with humidity, the kind that clung to collars and soaked through shirts as the day warmed. He parked at the cul-de-sac, glanced at the Taylor house standing silent behind him, and turned his eyes toward the tree line. Take it slow, he told the officers. Cover the ground in grids. Anything unusual, we flag it. The dog strained against its leash, eager, nose close to the soil. They moved in silence, save for the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Vega scanned the ground. Broken branches, tire tracks, discarded beer cans. The woods carried the messy history of neighborhood kids, but he was looking for something older, heavier. 10 minutes in, the dog whined sharply and pawed at a patch near a fallen oak. Vega knelt. The earth was disturbed. Not recent, but not ancient either. A subtle mound, as though something had been buried and the soil tamped clumsily back down. Get me a shovel, he said quietly. They dug carefully, the metallic scrape of the shovel against dirt echoing in the stillness. 6 inches down, metal clinked. Vega crouched, brushing soil away with gloved hands. A small box emerged, rusted but intact, no larger than a lunch pail. "Evidence bag," Vega ordered. Back at the precinct, the box was opened under controlled conditions. Inside lay objects that chilled the room into silence. A child's hair ribbon, pale blue, frayed at the edges. A pocket knife engraved with the initials DTA Polaroid photograph of the Taylor family, sitting at their own dining table. The picture was grainy, poorly lit, and the faces wore no smiles. Vega stared at the image. It was taken from inside the house. Across the table, Daniel's eyes seemed locked on the camera, wide, tense. Claire's hands clutched the children's shoulders. Emma's mouth was half open, as if caught in the middle of a word. Ryan's fork hovered above his plate. Someone had been inside the house before the blackout, watching them, photographing them, and that someone had buried the evidence like an offering. News of the discovery spread quickly. By evening, reporters swarmed the street again, their questions sharp, their cameras hungry. Vega refused to comment, his jaw tight as he walked past the microphones. He knew better than to reveal too much. The photograph was a knife, the kind you wield carefully, never showing until the cut was already made. Instead, he returned to the Martins' home. They had been the first to call. They had eyes across the street, and something in Linda Martin's twisting wedding ring still bothered him. She answered the door with a startled expression. "Detective? Is there news?" "We're still piecing things together," Vega said evenly. "Mind if I come in?" Her husband hovered in the kitchen doorway as she led Vega to the sitting room. The air smelled of brewed coffee and tension. "Mrs. Martin," Vega began, "you said you saw the family in the yard the afternoon before they vanished." "Yes," she said quickly. Claire waved. The children were playing. "And Mr. Taylor?" "He came home shortly after, around 6. Vega studied her face. "Did you see anyone else? Visitors? Delivery trucks? Strangers in the neighborhood?" Linda's eyes flicked to her husband, then back. Nothing unusual. But her pause betrayed her. Vega leaned forward. "Mrs. Martin, this isn't about gossip. This is about 4 lives. If you noticed anything at all, you need to tell me." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Gerald shifted, his jaw tight. Finally, Linda whispered, "Claire argued with someone. A man. In the driveway. The day before the blackout." Vega's pulse ticked higher. "What kind of argument?" I couldn't hear the words, but it was heated. He was tall, broad shoulders. Not Daniel, someone else. "Did you recognize him?" She hesitated again. Gerald spoke, voice clipped. "We don't get involved in other people's business, detective." Vega's eyes cut to him. "Maybe you should start." The silence between them was thick. Finally, Linda spoke again, voice trembling. "I think I saw him again. During the blackout, a shape moving in front of their house, just for a second when the candles flickered. I thought maybe it was my imagination." Vega's mind replayed the Polaroid. A man inside the dining room, camera in hand. "Why didn't you tell us before?" he asked softly. "Because," she whispered, twisting her ring. "Sometimes it's safer not to see." Back at the precinct, Vega pinned the Polaroid to the evidence board. The grainy photograph stared back, the frozen dinner scene like a painting of dread. Beside it, he added the blue ribbon and the knife. Tokens of presence, tokens of intrusion. Collins entered, dropping a folder on the desk. "Ran background on the Taylors' immediate circle. Friends, co-workers, church members. One name keeps surfacing, a man named Charles Avery. Former client of Daniel's, lost money in an investment last year, loud about it, showed up at the office twice, demanding repayment." "Broad shoulders?" Vega asked. Collins nodded. 6'2", 200 pounds. Lives on the edge of town, has a temper. Vega stared at the Polaroid, the knife, the ribbon. Charles Avery. But something in his gut resisted. Avery might be angry, but angry men made noise. This was not noise. This was orchestration. Still, a thread was a thread. "Bring him in," Vega said. The interrogation room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. Charles Avery sat across the table, hands folded, eyes darting. He was tall, broad, with a jaw like stone. "I didn't hurt the Taylors," Avery said immediately. "You think I did, but I didn't." "No one said you did," Vega replied calmly. "But you argued with Claire in the driveway. Witnesses saw it." Avery flinched. "That wasn't an argument. I was asking about Daniel. He owed me money. Claire kept brushing me off." "Money from the trust fund?" Vega asked. Avery's eyes flickered. He knew. "He promised me returns. I put in $20,000. I got back nothing. You think I wouldn't be upset?" Vega leaned in. "So you went to their house during the blackout?" "No," Avery snapped. His fists clenched. "I was home. Ask my wife." "Your wife doesn't alibi you. She says she was asleep." Avery's jaw tightened. "I didn't touch them. If they're gone, maybe Daniel finally got what was coming." Vega watched him closely. Avery's anger was real, raw, but beneath it was ignorance. He knew nothing about the Polaroid, about the ribbon, about the pocket knife. Avery was a storm, but not the architect. When Vega left the room, Collins frowned. "So he's not our guy?" Vega shook his head. "He's part of the smoke, but someone else lit the fire." That night, Vega sat alone at his desk. The Polaroid glared at him. The family frozen in dread. He thought of Linda Martin's whisper. "Sometimes it's safer not to see." He thought of Emma's words to her teacher. "When the lights go out, they come." The blackout was not coincidence. It was cover. Someone had pulled the plug, literally, to cloak their entry. Someone who knew how to vanish without trace. Someone who knew the Taylors well enough that the dog had not barked. He closed his eyes and imagined it. The lights snap off. Forks clatter to plates. The family waits in confusion. Then, a knock. A familiar voice. A door opening into darkness. And 40 minutes later, nothing but silence. Detective Vega always trusted phone records more than people. Human memory was pliable, shaped by fear, guilt, or the desire to appear useful. But numbers never lied. They traced habits, betrayals, double lives. Claire Taylor's records had been gnawing at him for days. The repeated calls to a burner phone were more than coincidence. They formed a pattern. Twice a week, always in the late afternoon when Daniel was still at work, sometimes lasting 5 minutes, sometimes close to an hour. On Tuesday morning, the tech unit brought him fresh data. "Detective, we triangulated," the technician explained, sliding a map across the table. The burner pinged near a payphone at a gas station on Route 16, 3 times in the past month. Vega leaned over the map. Route 16 cut across the county, connecting Cedar Hills to older rural stretches. The gas station sat at a lonely junction, the kind of place truckers stopped, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. "Anyone check the station cameras?" Vega asked. The tech gave a rueful smile. "This is 98. They've got nothing but a broken VCR in the back office. Tape over old tape. So no images, no plates. Just the ghost of a signal." Vega tapped the page. But someone kept meeting Claire there. Someone she didn't want tracked. By late afternoon, Vega found himself parked near the station. The place smelled of gasoline and fried food, the neon sign flickering even in daylight. He watched cars roll in, battered pickups, a delivery van, a teenager's rusted sedan. Ordinary. Forgettable. Inside, he ordered a coffee from the bored cashier, then asked casually, "You remember a woman coming through here regular?" Brown hair, mid-30s. Might have used the payphone outside. The cashier frowned, thought for a moment. "Yeah, think so. Nice lady, polite. Always had exact change. Usually came Thursdays, sometimes Fridays." "Ever see who she met?" The cashier shook his head. "Nope, she'd make a call, Then a car would pull up. Different cars, I think. Big ones. Didn't really look close. Vega thanked him, slipped back outside. The payphone stood at the edge of the lot, sun-faded, gum wedged in the seams. He pressed his palm against the cool metal, imagining Claire standing there, calling a ghost, waiting for a car, and then climbing in. Back at the precinct, Collins was less convinced. "Ray, we're spinning wheels," he said, leaning back in his chair. "So she had a secret friend, maybe a lover, maybe a confidant. Doesn't mean they all vanished together." Vega shook his head. Whoever was on the other end of that phone knew the family's rhythm. They knew when Daniel was gone. They knew when Claire was free. And they knew how to reach her without leaving a trail. He paused, then added, "That's not just a friend. That's someone she trusted more than her husband." Collins raised an eyebrow. "You're saying affair." "I'm saying attachment," Vega corrected. "Attachment strong enough to risk secrets. Strong enough to hide." He flipped open Claire's diary, recovered from the master bedroom. Most entries were mundane. Schedules, shopping lists, notes about piano students. But 3 weeks before the blackout, a line stood out. Thursday, 4 p.m. Call H. The next week, Friday, 4 p.m. H waiting. And finally, the day before the disappearance. Tomorrow. Last time? Decision must be made. Vega circled the letter H. 2 days later, they found him. Harold Whitman, 45. Divorced. Former piano tuner who had once worked in Claire's home. His name surfaced when techs dug deeper, cross-referencing the burner with landlines. One number had called it twice. Registered to Harold's small house on the west side of town. Vega knocked on the door one gray morning. Whitman answered in a rumpled shirt, his hair uncombed. He blinked at the badge, then stepped aside. "Detective, this about Claire." His tone was calm, almost resigned. "You knew her well," Vega said, taking in the cluttered living room, sheet music, empty coffee mugs, a piano pushed against the wall. Whitman sat heavily in a chair. "She was a friend, someone I could talk to. She needed that too." "More than a friend?" Vega asked. Whitman's eyes flickered. "We cared for each other, but she loved her children. She wouldn't abandon them." "You called her on a burner," Vega pressed. "Met her at a gas station. Why the secrecy?" Whitman exhaled, rubbed his forehead. "Because Daniel didn't know. She said he wouldn't understand. He was controlling. She felt trapped." "Did you see her the night of the blackout?" "No," Whitman said quickly. Too quickly. "Last time we spoke was the day before. She said she had to make a decision, that she couldn't live a double life anymore." Vega studied him. Harold Whitman was not broad-shouldered, not imposing, but his eyes carried intensity, the kind that clung. "What decision?" Vega asked. "She didn't say," Whitman whispered. "But I think she meant leaving him, starting over." That night, Vega replayed the threads. Daniel's missing money, Claire's secret calls, the Polaroid buried in the woods, the ribbon, the knife. And now Harold Whitman, the quiet man who tuned pianos and waited at gas stations. He pictured Claire standing at the payphone, clutching coins, whispering into the receiver. Tomorrow. Last time. Decision must be made. Had she chosen Harold? Had Daniel discovered it? Or had someone else been watching all along, waiting for the blackout to fall? The questions clawed at him, restless, circling. And when Vega finally slept, he dreamed of the Polaroid, the Taylor family frozen at their table. But in the dream, the photographer stepped into view. The figure wore no face, only shadow. And from the darkness, a voice whispered, "When the lights go out, they come." Detective Vega believed in hands, not words. When it came to guilt, people lied, polished their stories, even convinced themselves of innocence. But hands betrayed them. Hands shook when they remembered too much. Hands carried scars. Hands left prints. And so, when Harold Whitman was asked to come down to the precinct for a few more questions, Vega watched his hands before anything else. They trembled as Harold lit a cigarette outside the entrance, the flame quivering. They steadied when he spoke softly to the receptionist. They twitched when Vega entered the room. The interrogation room was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights bearing down like a pressure. Harold sat across the table, arms folded tightly, eyes darting toward the two-way glass, as if trying to see who else might be listening. "You told me Claire said she had a decision to make," Vega began, voice measured. "What did you think she meant?" Harold rubbed his knuckles, gaze unfocused. "I thought she meant leaving Daniel. She was unhappy, lonely. She told me she couldn't breathe in that house anymore." Vega let the silence linger. Yet she stayed. For years, Harold's jaw tightened. Because of the kids. Always the kids. Emma, Ryan. She'd never hurt them. Then why the secrecy? Vega pressed. Why the burner phone? Why gas station meetings instead of coffee shops or parks? She was afraid, Harold whispered. Said Daniel had a temper when cornered. Said he watched the accounts, watched her spending. She didn't want him knowing. Vega studied him. Harold spoke with the intensity of obsession, his voice cracking not with grief, but with possession. "Where were you during the blackout?" Vega asked. Harold blinked. "Home, alone. Anyone see you?" "No." His throat bobbed. Collins entered quietly, sliding a folder onto the table. Vega opened it, revealing crime scene photographs. The Polaroid, the buried ribbon, the knife. He placed them in front of Harold one by one. "Do you recognize these?" Harold's breath hitched when he saw the ribbon. "That's Emma's," he whispered. "You're certain?" He nodded quickly. "She wore it in her hair. Claire told me." Vega leaned forward. "And how would you know that, Harold, unless you were inside that house?" Harold's face drained. "I never." "You knew about the ribbon," Vega said softly, dangerously. "And you knew about Claire's unhappiness. And you had no alibi the night her entire family disappeared." For the first time, Harold's hands betrayed him. They shook violently now, fingers clawing at each other. "I loved her," he muttered. "I would never hurt her." "Love doesn't explain the ribbon," Vega said. "Love doesn't explain the Polaroid taken inside the dining room." Harold's eyes filled, but it wasn't sorrow. It was fear. "You don't understand," he said, voice breaking. "It wasn't just me and Claire. There was someone else, watching her, watching us." Vega froze. "Who?" Harold's lips trembled. "I don't know, but I felt it, at the gas station, in the woods. Sometimes I'd see a car parked too far back, lights off, just sitting there." The interview was suspended. Harold was not under arrest, not yet. But Vega knew he had to dig harder. That night he returned to the Taylor house. The forensic team had finished, but Vega wanted silence, the kind only a dead house offered. He moved through the rooms like a shadow, flashlight sweeping corners. In the upstairs hallway, he stopped at Emma's room. The lavender scent had faded, replaced by dust. On the dresser lay her diary, overlooked in earlier searches. Vega opened it carefully. Most entries were childish scribbles, school, friends, dolls. But the last page made his stomach clench. "Mom says don't tell Dad about Mr. H. Mr. H brings candy. Sometimes he waits in the yard when it's dark. I don't like when he watches the windows." Vega closed the diary, pulse pounding. Harold hadn't mentioned standing in the yard. And Claire. Had she invited him? Or was Harold twisting trust into intrusion? Either way, the line was crossed. 2 days later, a technician called Vega to the evidence room. "We got something from the knife," she said. The pocket knife, engraved with DT, had been corroded by years in the soil, but careful lifting had revealed a partial fingerprint trapped in grease along the hinge. "It's not Daniel's," the tech said. "Not in AFIS either. but it matches a latent pull from the tailor's back door frame. Vega exhaled. Whoever buried the knife had been inside the house. Whoever had touched it had also touched the locked door. And when the tech handed him the comparison sheet, Vega's breath caught. The pattern resembled Harold Whitman's print, close enough to make suspicion heavy, not enough for proof. Collins was less hesitant. "Ray, he's our guy," Collins insisted, slamming the report on the desk. "He stalked Claire. He brought candy for the girl. He left prints in the house. He lied about being there. This isn't just infatuation, it's obsession." Vega rubbed his temples. "Obsession, yes. But obsession doesn't orchestrate a blackout across half a block. Obsession doesn't erase a family without leaving a trace." "Maybe he had help," Collins shot back. "Maybe whoever was watching from the woods was working with him." Vega thought of Harold's trembling hands, of the fear behind his eyes. Harold was guilty of something: trespass, violation, lies. But Vega's instincts told him Harold was not the puppeteer. He was a pawn, and pawns were often sacrificed to protect the king. Late Friday evening, Vega returned to Harold's small house with a warrant. The place smelled of stale smoke and varnish. They searched for 3 hours, combing through drawers, closets, the attic. At first, nothing. Then one of the officers called from the basement. "Detective, you need to see this." In the corner, behind a stack of crates, they found a box. Inside, dozens of photographs. Claire walking to her car, Emma on her bike, Ryan at baseball practice, Claire at the kitchen window, face turned as if sensing the lens. The angles were long, distant, taken from bushes, from across the street, stalking, documenting, building a private archive, and at the very bottom, a single Polaroid, the Taylor dining room. Not the same as the one buried in the woods, but the same night. Different angle. Someone else had been in that room, because Harold Whitman was in the photograph. He sat at the table, hands folded, eyes down. Claire looked tense beside him. Daniel's jaw was clenched. The children leaned away. Vega's stomach turned. Harold had been there, inside the house, at the dinner table. Hours before the blackout swallowed everything. The interrogation room felt colder that morning. Maybe it was the autumn chill seeping through the walls, or maybe it was the weight of the photograph Vega carried in his hand. He slid it across the table toward Harold Whitman. Harold froze. His face drained as he stared at the grainy Polaroid. Claire stiff at the table, Daniel's jaw locked, the children leaning away, and Harold himself, caught in the frame, seated like a shadow at a family dinner where he did not belong. "You told me you weren't there that night," Vega said evenly. Harold's lips parted, then shut again. His hands shook violently, fingers twitching toward the photo as if he might snatch it back, hide it, erase it. Claire invited me," he whispered finally. Vega leaned forward. "Invited you? To a family dinner?" "She said Daniel needed to know," Harold said, his voice trembling. "She couldn't live in secrets anymore. She wanted it out in the open." "Wanted what out?" Vega pressed. Harold swallowed hard. "Us. That she cared for me. That she was leaving." The silence stretched, thick with disbelief. Vega's eyes narrowed. "So you sat at their table, and then what?" Harold's face twisted. "It was awful. Daniel was furious. He said I was pathetic, delusional. He told Claire she was embarrassing herself, dragging trash into their home. The children were terrified. Claire cried. I wanted to leave, but—" "But what?" Vega demanded. Harold's voice dropped to a whisper. The lights went out. Vega felt the room shift, every word hanging like frost. "The blackout." Harold nodded, tears forming. "At first we thought it was the neighborhood, just bad timing. But then—" His voice broke. Then there was a knock at the door. Vega didn't move, didn't breathe. "Who knocked?" Harold's gaze darted around the room as if the answer might materialize in the corners. "I don't know." Daniel got up. He shouted something. "It's late. Go home." But then the voice answered. Calm, steady, like it belonged there. What did it say? "Open up. It's time." Vega's chest tightened. Did Daniel open the door? Yes, he said he wasn't afraid. He thought it was some neighbor messing around. But when he opened it, Harold's hands clenched, knuckles white. They came in. 2 men, one tall, heavy-set, the other smaller, quicker. They had flashlights, guns. Vega's pulse pounded. And then, "They ordered everyone up," Harold whispered. "Told Claire to keep the children quiet. Daniel tried to fight, but..." He stopped, shaking his head violently. "They hit him, hard. The kids screamed. They made me stand too, shoved me against the wall, said if I moved, I'd die." The room seemed to close in around them. Vega's pen pressed into the paper, his notes quick, precise. "You saw their faces?" Harold shook his head. "Masks, ski masks, black. Only their voices." The tall one spoke more, calm, almost polite. The smaller one, he was angry, unstable. "And what did they want?" Vega asked. Harold's eyes glistened with fear, old and fresh at once. "They wanted Claire. They said, 'She comes with us.' Daniel shouted, said they'd never take her, and then the tall one. He said, 'It's not just her anymore. They all belong.'" Vega felt a chill run down his spine. "Where did they take them?" he asked, voice tight. Harold's tears spilled. "I don't know. They tied me, gagged me, dragged them out the back. I heard Emma crying, Ryan begging. Then the door shut. When I could finally move again, the house was empty, silent, like they'd been erased. For a long moment, the room was still. Vega leaned back, studying Harold. The story was wild, terrifying, but it explained too much to ignore. The blackout, the Polaroid, the silence afterward. "You never told anyone this," Vega said finally. Harold's voice cracked. "Who would believe me? I was the other man, the fool in love with a married woman. They'd think I arranged it. They'd hang me before listening." Vega didn't answer, because Harold was right. Even now, with the photograph in hand, his presence at that table made him a perfect suspect. But there was one truth Vega couldn't shake. Harold was alive. If the masked men had wanted to erase everyone, Harold would never have left that house. His survival was deliberate. A message, a warning, or a promise. Back in the squad room, Collins read Vega's notes with a scowl. "So now we've got ski masks and mystery kidnappers? This keeps getting murkier." "He lied before," Vega said. "But this part, it fits. Too well to be invented. Or he's clever enough to weave it from what he knows we've already found," Collins countered. "You're trusting the word of a stalker who kept a shrine of photographs." "I'm not trusting him," Vega said flatly. "I'm trusting the holes in his story. If he made it up, he'd have placed himself as the hero. But he paints himself a coward, tied and gagged. That kind of self-incrimination isn't easy to fabricate." Collins sighed. "So what's our next move?" Vega stared at the Polaroid, at the dinner table frozen in dread. "We hunt the masks." That night, Vega couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at Emma's diary. "Mr. H brings candy. Sometimes he waits in the yard when it's dark. I don't like when he watches the windows." Harold was guilty of trespass, of obsession, but Emma's last line gnawed at him. "When the lights go out, they come." It wasn't Harold she feared. It was them. Whoever they were, they had been circling long before the blackout. The next morning, Vega drove out to the woods again. The soil where the Polaroid box had been dug still bore the scars of shovels. He stood at the edge of the trees, eyes sweeping the cul-de-sac, the Taylor house looming silent at its center. The neighbors' windows reflected morning light, curtains drawn, secrets tucked away. And Vega wondered, how many had seen shadows that night, shapes moving in the dark? How many had chosen silence, like Linda Martin twisting her wedding ring, whispering that it was safer not to see. The Taylor family had been erased in 40 minutes of darkness. But erasure was never perfect. Somewhere, in a neighbor's memory, in a child's half-forgotten nightmare, in a buried box of tokens, the truth waited. And Vega swore he would tear through every silence until it screamed. Detective Vega knew electricity grids better than he wanted to. Years of homicides had taught him that lights flicker when a wire is cut, that darkness can be manufactured with the twist of a switch. But never had he seen an entire suburban block swallowed whole while the rest of the town glowed normally. On Monday morning, he drove out to the county utilities department, a squat brick building humming with transformers. Inside, he was led to a conference room where a senior engineer named Marie Keller laid out charts across the table. "We reviewed the outage logs from that night," she said, tapping a sheet filled with numbers. "It wasn't a grid failure. It was isolated. Only Ashwood Drive and 2 adjacent streets went down. Everything else stayed live." Vega frowned. "How does that happen?" Marie's expression was grim. "Someone pulled the cut manually. We found evidence at the substation. A lock forced, breakers tripped by hand. Whoever did it knew exactly what to target." Vega felt the hair on his arms rise. So it wasn't chance. Someone manufactured darkness for that block. For those houses, Marie nodded. The timing was precise. 7:41 p.m., blackout initiated. Power restored at 8:24, 43 minutes total. Whoever did it wasn't trying to cause chaos. They wanted a window. A window. A window of darkness wide enough to erase a family. Back at the precinct, Vega laid the report on Colin's desk. "Deliberate," Vega said flatly. "The blackout was engineered. This wasn't about a broken transformer or storm. Someone shut the lights down to give cover." Collins whistled low. "That means planning, tools, access, not some spur-of-the-moment crime of passion." Vega nodded. "And it means Harold's story might hold water. He said 2 men came in during the blackout. That timing is too perfect to ignore." Collins leaned back, folding his arms. "So we're looking at organized abduction, not just domestic fallout." "Or both," Vega muttered. "Harold could have been bait. Claire's affair a distraction, but the blackout, that's tactical. That's military precision." That evening, Vega returned to Ashwood Drive. The street looked ordinary in daylight. Children's bikes left in driveways, sprinklers misting lawns, curtains drawn against the autumn sun. But to Vega's eyes, the houses looked staged, as if waiting for someone to notice the flaws in the set. He spoke with neighbors again, this time focusing on the power cut. The Johnsons remembered hearing Emma cry before the silence fell. The Martins swore they saw a car idling at the edge of the woods, headlights briefly flashing. An older man across the street recalled the hum of a generator kicking in somewhere, faint but steady. A generator. Vega pressed him. "Where?" The man shrugged. "Couldn't say. Sounded like from the woods. I thought maybe construction crews." But there had been no crews. No reason for a generator, unless someone had needed their own light while the rest of the block drowned in dark. By Thursday, Vega had a theory forming like storm clouds. The blackout had been staged to cover an abduction. The Taylors had been targeted. Not randomly plucked. But why? Harold's obsession explained part of it. Daniel's off-book accounts explained another. Claire's secrets connected threads. But none of it justified tripping breakers, staging a covert operation, hauling away an entire family. There was more beneath, something deeper. Late one night, Vega sat in his office surrounded by files. He studied Daniel's fake trust accounts again. The names fabricated, the money missing. Nearly $50,000 untraceable. Where had it gone? He pulled the logs again, searching for patterns. Withdrawals every Thursday, coinciding almost exactly with Claire's burner calls. It wasn't just Claire who had secrets. Daniel did too. And the timing suggested overlap, like 2 halves of a puzzle hidden from each other. Vega circled dates in his notebook. Thursday withdrawals, Thursday calls, Thursday meetings, and on one Thursday in early October, 3 weeks before the blackout, both records stopped. No more withdrawals, no more calls, as if someone had intervened, as if someone else had taken control. The next morning, Vega drove back to the substation. He stood inside the fenced yard, staring at the breaker box that had been forced. The padlock lay in an evidence bag, cut cleanly. He imagined the scene, a man in gloves, bolt cutters in hand, waiting for the exact moment. 43 minutes of darkness measured like clockwork. This wasn't Harold. This wasn't Daniel. This was someone else entirely. And whoever they were, they had planned the suburban blackout not as chaos, but as ritual. As Vega left the substation, he glanced up at the woods lining the highway. Sunlight flickered through branches, but in his mind, he saw only the absence of light. The thick, suffocating dark where children whispered, "When the lights go out, they come." He tightened his grip on the wheel, because now he knew. They hadn't just vanished. They'd been hunted. Detective Vega sat alone in the records room, the kind of silence that made fluorescent bulbs buzz louder. Dozens of manila folders surrounded him. Daniel Taylor's accounts cross-referenced withdrawals and flagged anomalies from the bank. The paper trail was faint, half erased, but not gone. Daniel had withdrawn close to $50,000 across 3 years, cash mostly. What little remained left breadcrumbs, odd transfers to a name that meant nothing at first, C. Carnes. At midnight, under the pale hum of the desk lamp, Vega traced the name again, Carnes. It scraped at memory like a dull blade. He pulled old case files, unsolved robberies, county records of electrical contractors. And there it was, buried in a fraud investigation. Charles Carnes, former lineman, fired in 1986 for tampering with grid equipment, known to police for scams, suspected in disappearances along rural highways, never convicted. A man who knew how to pull breakers, a man who knew how to erase light. Vega exhaled sharply, heart hammering. Daniel's money hadn't vanished, it had been feeding Carnes. The next morning, Vega briefed Collins. Carnes was Daniel's hidden transaction partner, Vega said, slapping the file down. A disgraced lineman. Knew the power system inside out, perfect for orchestrating a blackout. Collins raised an eyebrow. So you're saying Daniel hired him? Vega shook his head. Or Carnes leaned on him. Blackmail, extortion. Daniel funnels money out, pays Carnes. Then when it stops, the blackout, Collins finished grimly. It fit too neatly. Daniel cuts off the cash. Carnes retaliates. Only this wasn't just about money. Families didn't vanish over debts alone. No, Carnes had wanted something else. That evening, Vega revisited Harold Whitman. Harold looked worse. Hollow cheeks, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling around a mug of coffee. Vega placed the file on the table. Harold, you said 2 men came in the night of the blackout. 1 tall, 1 smaller. Ski masks. Harold nodded, fear flickering in his eyes. Do you remember their names? Anything they called each other? Harold hesitated, then closed his eyes, searching memory. The smaller one. He called the tall one Charlie. Just once. Shouted it when Daniel tried to fight. Charlie, grab him! Vega's pulse spiked. Charlie Carnes! Harold's eyes snapped open. That was his name. Vega slid the file across the table. A mugshot from the late 80s stared back. A heavy-set man. Coarse hair, eyes like dull marbles. Harold's face went pale. That's him. The discovery tightened the web. Claire's secrecy, Daniel's hidden money, Harold's obsession, and Carnes' shadow. All threads converging in that dining room the night the lights died. But one question burned. Why the children? Why Emma and Ryan? Debts and affairs explained Daniel and Claire. But Emma's diary, the ribbon, the Polaroid, those spoke of something more sinister. Vega spent the next days combing Carnes's past. It was like pulling rotten boards off an abandoned house. In 1987, a family in El Paso reported a strange man watching their daughters play in the yard. They described a tall man with a heavy build. The police had no suspect then. In 1991, 2 girls disappeared outside a rest stop near San Antonio. Witnesses described a man offering them candy, promising to show them puppies. In 1994, a teenage babysitter reported being followed home by a truck. She remembered the driver's laugh. Low, coarse, mocking. Each time, Carnes' name floated in the margins, never charged, never proven. Always drifting, always present. Now, Daniel's missing money tied him directly, and Harold's story placed him in the Taylor house. That night, Vega sat in his car across from the empty house. The windows reflected only his headlights, black and unyielding. He thought of Emma's words. When the lights go out, they come. It wasn't childish fear. It was memory. They had been stalked, groomed, prepared. And Carnes had been waiting for the exact moment to strike. On Thursday morning, Vega brought his findings to Captain Morales. "This isn't just abduction," Vega said firmly. "This is predation. Carnes had a history of watching families, especially children. Daniel's money was hush money. When it stopped, Carnes staged the blackout and took them all." Morales studied him. "And Harold Whitman?" Vega's jaw tightened. "Collateral, obsessive, yes. Guilty of trespass, lies, but not the architect. Carnes is the architect." Morales leaned back. "So where is he now?" That was the problem. Carnes hadn't had a known address in years. He moved through junkyards, rural properties, abandoned farmhouses, ghost footprints across counties. But ghosts left shadows, and Vega intended to chase them. That night, back in his apartment, Vega spread the files across his kitchen table. Harold's trembling confession, Daniel's accounts, the Polaroid, the knife, and at the center, Charles Carnes. The man who had pulled the breakers, the man who had walked through the Taylor's unlocked door, the man who had whispered, "It's time." The farmhouse sat half-swallowed by cedar trees, its porch sagging, its windows blacked by rot. Vega found it through a paper trail so thin it could have torn in his hands. A utilities record from 2002 listing a temporary service hookup to C. Carnes, canceled after 6 months. The address was a rural property 30 miles outside Cedar Hills. When he pulled onto the dirt road, silence pressed in. No birdsong, no hum of power lines, only the creak of branches overhead. The house looked abandoned, but Vega knew better. Ghosts didn't need furniture to haunt a place. He parked, stepped out. Gravel crunched underfoot. His hand rested on the grip of his flashlight like it was a weapon. Inside, the air reeked of mildew. The floor groaned under his weight. Each room was stripped bare, except for the kitchen. There, nailed to the wall, hung a child's drawing. Crayon figures, a family of 4, a dog, a house with smoke curling from its chimney. Underneath, in a child's handwriting, one word: home. Vega's breath caught. Emma. It had to be Emma. The drawing was dated 1999, a year after the blackout. Forensics combed the farmhouse for 2 days. They lifted faint prints from windowsills, shoe impressions in the dust. In the cellar, they found ropes frayed from knots and a mattress soiled with age. And in a corner, buried under debris, a shoe. Small, white, with faded pink trim. Children's size 3. It was the kind of discovery that both answered and deepened the mystery. The Taylors had been here, alive at least for a time. But where had they gone next? Back at the precinct, Vega stared at the photographs of the farmhouse evidence. Emma's drawing haunted him most. Home. It wasn't random scrawl. It was communication. A message left where someone might one day find it. He imagined her sitting cross-legged on a cold floor, crayons trembling in her hand, trying to keep memory alive. It told him something else too. They had been held together. Not separated, not scattered. Whoever Carnes was, whatever his motives, he had kept them as a unit, at least in those early months. That suggested something more than impulse. It suggested purpose. Collins sat down heavily beside him, dropping a folder. Pulled records on Carnes's last known associates. He used to run with a guy named Jason Caraway, mechanic, in and out of county lockup for petty theft, assaults. Word is, they were like brothers. Vega flipped through the sheet. Jason Caraway, mid-30s, lean build, tattoos across both arms. Arrested twice in the early 90s for burglary, once for possession of a firearm. Never held long. Jason, Vega muttered. Harold had mentioned two men that night, one tall, calm, one smaller, unstable. Carnes and Caraway fit too well. Collins leaned closer. You think they both staged it? Blackout, abduction, farmhouse? More than think. Vega said quietly. I know it, but we're missing the why. Collins tapped the photo of Emma's drawing. Maybe this is the why. They weren't after Daniel or Claire. They were after the children. That night, Vega drove home but couldn't sleep. Rain streaked his apartment windows, streetlights glowing hazy in the mist. He sat at the table with Emma's diary again, running his fingers over the words. Mr. H brings candy. Sometimes he waits in the yard when it's dark. I don't like when he watches the windows. It wasn't Harold she feared most. It was them, the watchers in the dark, the men who came when the lights went out. 2 days later, a deputy sheriff from a neighboring county called. They'd run the farmhouse shoe through old missing persons evidence. The style matched shoes sold in 1998 at only 2 local stores. Receipts showed a purchase under Claire Taylor's name. It was Emma's shoe. Confirmation, a shard of certainty in the haze. Vega hung up the phone and sat very still. The Taylors had survived the first night, lived long enough for Emma to outgrow her shoes, to leave drawings behind. But then, silence. Where had Carnes taken them next? He went back through Harold's statement line by line. They ordered everyone up. Daniel tried to fight. The tall one was calm. The smaller one was angry. They said, "She comes with us." They all belong. That last phrase echoed. They all belong. Belong to what? A group? A purpose? Or to someone else entirely? Vega met Morales in her office. She scanned the farmhouse photos in silence, lips pressed tight. Evidence of captivity, she said finally. But no bodies, which means, technically, they could still be alive. Vega nodded. If they were kept once, they could be kept again, somewhere else. Carnes doesn't just erase, he holds. Morales' eyes hardened. Then find where? That evening, Vega spread county maps across his desk. He marked the Taylor home, the substation, the farmhouse. Lines connected them like veins. The blackout had been precision. The farmhouse, deliberate. Carnes wasn't random. He was patterned, and patterns left trails. Vega traced rural properties, old foreclosures, isolated barns. Every place Carnes had access to. One address, circled twice in old tax records, drew his eye. A trailer lot registered under Jason Caraway's name. 15 miles from the farmhouse, abandoned since 2001. Vega's pulse quickened. It could be the next stop. The trailer lot sat at the edge of a gravel road, weeds curling up through rusted chain links. The November wind pushed across empty fields, carrying the faint metallic rattle of tin siding. Detective Vega stood with Collins and a tactical team just before dawn. Their boots pressed frost into the ground, radios whispering static. The place looked deserted. A single trailer, its aluminum skin dulled, leaning slightly on rotted blocks. Caraway's last registered address, Collins murmured. Looks like no one's lived here in 20 years. Ghosts live longer than people, Vega replied, eyes fixed on the trailer. He raised a hand. The team advanced, weapons drawn. The door creaked as it gave under the ram. Dust billowed out, thick and bitter. Inside, the trailer smelled of rust and mildew. Furniture was skeletal, springs showing through cushions, curtains eaten by moths. But in the back room, the air shifted. Collins' flashlight beam landed on a metal cabinet bolted to the floor. Vega knelt, pried it open. Inside lay bundles of photographs. He pulled one free. His stomach turned. It was Emma, older than the Polaroid at the dinner table. 11, maybe 12. Her hair longer, her face thinner. She was sitting on a stained mattress, hands bound, eyes swollen from crying. Vega's chest tightened. Another photograph. Ryan, clutching a torn blanket, gaze fixed off camera. Hollow. Then Claire, pale, exhausted, holding both children close. Behind her stood a shadow. Heavy shoulders, a bulk that filled the frame. Charlie Carnes. The room fell silent except for the shuffle of photographs. Each image carved away the illusion of time. The Taylors had been alive for years after 1998. Alive, photographed, kept. Collins whispered, "My God, this is proof." Vega's hand shook as he set the photos aside. This is captivity. Documentation. He kept them here. But for how long? And where had they gone after? Forensics cataloged the evidence. Each photograph sealed in bags. Under the trailer's floorboards, they found scraps of fabric, strands of blonde hair, a child's drawing of a tree with initials scrawled into the trunk, E+R, Emma and Ryan, and, disturbingly, in the cabinet's bottom drawer, 3 small ID tags, scorched as though burned. Daniel T., Claire T., Emma T. No tag for Ryan. Back at the precinct, Vega studied the photographs until dawn blurred into day. The images aged over time, Emma's face sharpening, Ryan growing taller, Claire's body worn thinner. Years were captured in stolen moments, but after 2005, the photos stopped. A final one remained, the family huddled in a corner, Carnes' shadow stretching across them. Then silence. Where had they gone? Why stop documenting? Collins leaned over his shoulder. We've got timeline proof now. They weren't killed in 98. They were kept for nearly 7 years. Jesus, Vega, 7 years. Vega nodded slowly. Which means somebody out there knows more. Carnes didn't work alone. Harold said 2 men. Caraway must have been here too. Someone took those pictures. Collins frowned. Caraway disappeared in 2003. Arrest warrant never served. You think he's dead? Or worse, Vega muttered. Still out there, still watching. That evening, Vega returned to Ashwood Drive. The Taylor house stood silent in the dusk, windows blind, shutters sagging. He parked and walked the sidewalk, remembering Emma's words in her diary. When the lights go out, they come. She hadn't been writing metaphor. She'd been recording history. Carnes had made darkness his weapon, but the photographs told another truth. Daylight didn't save them either. 7 years in shadow. 7 years of waiting. At his apartment that night, Vega spread the photos on his table. He forced himself to look, to feel, to carry what the Taylors had endured. Emma's tired smile when she tried to comfort Ryan. Claire's protective arm even when her face was bruised. Daniel's absence after the first year. Gone from every frame. Erased from their story. Vega whispered to himself, "What happened to you, Daniel?" The answer might have been in the scorched tags. Daniel T. Destroyed first. The next morning, Morales gathered the team. We have evidence of long-term captivity tied to Charles Carnes and Jason Caraway. We prioritize locating both men. Warrants will be issued for search and arrest. Any properties, Any associates, we turn over every stone. Vega raised the photographs. This proves they survived years after the blackout. But the trail goes cold after 2005. We need to know why. Morales nodded grimly. Then find out, because until we do, the Taylor's case is still open. That night, Vega stood again at the farmhouse clearing, the ruins of Captivity whispering through the trees. He closed his eyes and imagined footsteps, children's bare feet on cold floors, Claire's whispered lullabies, Daniel's voice fading into silence. The blackout hadn't ended that night in 1998. It had stretched into years, and somewhere in the dark, the Taylor's final chapter waited to be uncovered. The rain fell hard on the highway as Detective Vega drove toward the abandoned quarry, wipers barely keeping pace. The lead had come from a utility subcontractor, a property once leased by Jason Carraway under a false name. Buried in the paperwork was something chilling: a generator registered to Carnes Electric Salvage. It was the first confirmed overlap between Carnes and Carraway since the photographs stopped in 2005. The quarry sprawled like a wound in the earth, its cliffs raw and jagged. At the edge stood a corrugated metal shed, rust bleeding down its sides. Vega parked, killed the engine, and listened. Only rain, hammering on tin. He stepped inside. The shed smelled of oil and rust. Dust coated the workbench, but in the back corner, hidden under a tarp, was a wooden crate. Vega pulled it open. Inside lay reels of videotape, each labeled in smeared marker: T1999, T2000, T2001. Vega's hands trembled. He slipped one reel into the portable player brought along by forensics. The screen crackled to life. Claire appeared, exhausted, gaunt, holding Emma and Ryan close. Behind the camera, a man laughed, low, guttural. Carnes. The tapes chronicled years of captivity, birthdays marked with stale cake. Emma forced to sing, Ryan weeping quietly, Claire whispering lullabies when she thought the camera wasn't rolling. And then, in 2003, a shift. Daniel was gone. Only Claire and the children remained. Vega felt bile rise. Daniel hadn't abandoned them. He'd been erased. The final tape, dated 2005, showed Emma alone, 16, her eyes empty. Carnes' voice instructed her to look at the camera, to smile. She didn't. He struck her. The tape cut to black. After that, silence. No more recordings. Vega staggered out of the shed, rain cooling his skin. The quarry yawned before him, dark water pooling at its base. He radioed Collins. Found tapes, proof of captivity until 2005. Daniel's gone by 2003. After that, unclear. We need divers in the quarry, now. Within hours, search crews descended. Floodlights lit the pit like a stage. Divers slipped into the black water, their beams slicing through silt. Minutes crawled. Then, one surfaced, voice urgent. Body bag. They found 3 over 2 days. Each weighted with cinder blocks wrapped in tarp. Forensics confirmed. Daniel first. Killed early, likely 1999. His remains showed signs of blunt force trauma. The second bag held Claire. Estimated death, 2004. Cause, strangulation. The third, Emma, 17, dead by 2005. Ryan's body was never found. Back at the precinct, Vega sat with Morales in silence. The case that had lived in shadows for 16 years now lay under fluorescent light. Clinical, documented. Carnes killed Daniel first, Vega said, voice raw. Kept Claire and the kids alive for years. When Daniel stopped paying, Carnes took control. By 2005, he killed them too, except Ryan. His body isn't here, which means... Morales finished softly. He could still be alive. Vega nodded. Or Carnes kept him longer. The arrest came at dawn. Carnes, older now, gray hair tangled, living in a shack outside Waco. He didn't resist. Just smiled when officers swarmed. Always knew you'd come knocking, he muttered. Vega faced him in interrogation. The man's eyes were flat, reptilian. "Where is Ryan?" Vega demanded. Carnes chuckled. "That boy? Stronger than his daddy. Lasted longer too. Maybe he's still out there. Maybe he isn't." Darkness swallows what it wants. Vega slammed his hand on the table. "You killed them." Carnes leaned closer, breath sour. "I didn't kill them. I kept them. They were mine to keep." Weeks later, forensic teams confirmed the quarry remains. Families from Cedar Hills gathered for a memorial. Photographs of Daniel, Claire, Emma stood on easels, candles flickering. Ryan's frame was left empty. Vega watched from the back. Survivors whispered prayers, hands clasped, but he couldn't shake Carnes's final words. Maybe he's still out there. On a rainy night, Vega returned to Ashwood Drive. The Taylor house loomed, its windows blind. He sat in his car, headlights off, watching. He thought of Emma's diary, of Ryan's ribbon, of Claire's lullabies on tape. The blackout had been engineered. But the true darkness was carried in men like Carnes, patient, methodical, hungry. The Taylor story had ended in captivity, cruelty, death. But one question still pulsed like a live wire. If Ryan was alive, where had he gone? Vega lit a cigarette, staring at the darkened house. He knew the case wasn't closed. Not really. Because somewhere, in the shadows beyond Ashwood, a boy had grown into a man, a survivor, a witness. And if Ryan Taylor still breathed, he carried the final chapter no one else could write. The story of the Taylor family did not end with a blackout. It stretched across 7 years of captivity, through barns and trailers and the damp cellar of a farmhouse. It stretched into photographs and videotapes that chronicled not just survival, but erosion. The slow withering of identity under the grip of Charles Carnes. And yet, even in captivity, the Taylors left traces. Emma's diary beneath her pillow, the drawing tacked to the farmhouse wall, the initials etched into floorboards. These fragments were not just artifacts. They were signals, proof that memory outlives silence. The official record is stark. Daniel Taylor, murdered in 1999. Claire Taylor, strangled in 2004. Emma Taylor, dead at 17. Her body recovered from a quarry in 2005. But Ryan Taylor's fate remains unwritten. His body was never recovered. His name never appeared on Carnes's scorched tags. His presence vanished from the tapes after 2005, but not from possibility. In Cedar Hills, people still drive past Ashwood Drive and slow at the house where the lights went out. The shutters are sealed, the grass grows high, but neighbors leave flowers at the base of the mailbox. Children walk faster when the street lamps flicker. Parents tell them, "Don't dawdle in the dark." And though the crime has been solved in the legal sense, Carnes and Caraway both arrested, their evidence exposed, the community knows closure is not the same as peace, because in their minds, the blackout never ended. Detective Vega gave his final interview years later, gray at the temples, his voice steadier than he felt. "We solved the mechanics," he told the reporter. "We know how the power was cut, how the Taylors were taken, how long they were kept, but we don't know why Ryan was different. And until we do, the case is unfinished." He paused, staring past the camera. "Some nights, I still expect him to walk into the station, older, scarred, but alive. And until the day I retire, I'll keep that door open." The tapes remain locked in evidence storage, rarely viewed, too haunting for the unprepared. But the photographs are shown to cadets in the academy, not to sensationalize, but to warn. Crimes of darkness are often engineered in plain sight. The suburban blackout was never just about electricity. It was about control, about extinguishing visibility so cruelty could thrive unchallenged. And still, questions linger. Did Ryan escape? Was he taken somewhere else? Did Carnes lie about keeping him longer? Or was it the only truth he ever told? No one knows, but sometimes hikers in rural Texas report seeing a man in his 30s wandering trails alone, silent, watchful, unwilling to speak his name. Authorities chase leads, none stick, but the whispers remain. On YouTube channels and podcasts, storytellers return to the Taylor's case. They begin with the hook. In 1998, the lights on Ashwood Drive went out. When they came back on, a family of 4 was gone. What investigators discovered would haunt a community for decades, and one mystery still remains. And at the end, they always leave space for the question, what became of Ryan Taylor? The answer may never come, or it may arrive one ordinary evening with a man stepping forward, carrying scars across his arms and silence in his eyes. Until then, the Taylor family remains suspended between memory and myth. 3 names carved into stone and 1 left open. A blackout that began with 43 minutes of darkness still ripples decades later. Because when the lights went out, the Taylors vanished. And when the lights came back on, the world was never the same.